This Purim, we're using hamantaschen to think about intention and impact, and also interrogating the idea that Vashti and Esther must be competitors.
This is Jews Talk Racial Justice with April and Tracie,
a weekly show hosted by April Baskin and Tracie Guy-Decker.
In a complex world, change takes courage.
Wholehearted relationships can keep us accountable.
Hi, Tracie.
Hey, April. Happy Purim.
Happy Purim. That's right. It's Purim right now. Yay. Happy Purim, everybody. Happy Purim, Tracie.
Thanks. You too.
Purim Sameach.
Yeah.
It was so nice and fun re-listening to our episode from last year. And I'm so glad that we did, because I both have new material and there was a bunch of stuff that I basically wanted to still say. So it was helpful to hear and be like, oh, we already discussed this. And I also noticed how cute we are. I was just like, oh, listen to our dynamic. Oh, I love us.
Yeah, I had similar thoughts.
Yeah. I was like, oh, that's right. That's why we do this. We really got something here. So what's on your mind? I often lead, which is great from an equity perspective. And I feel like if you have a sense, I'm happy to follow your cue.
So I do have one lesson that I'm thinking about this year about Purim that we didn't talk about last year. So I thought maybe I'd lead with that. So I was making hamantaschen this week, and I was remembering I had this conversation probably 10 years ago now, where we were talking about the mitzvah of giving mishloach manot, the Purim baskets with the food, and the halacha says you're supposed to give food ready to eat, and it has to be like two different kinds of food. And I had this conversation with someone where we were talking about, okay, it was one of those Talmudic kind of like halacha conversations, right? So the question was, if you give a Purim basket to someone and they are allergic to something, like they cannot eat, they're allergic to something in the basket that you gave, like say I gave my hamantaschen to someone who's gluten-free, have I completed the mitzvah? That was the original question. And there was a whole, and of course, that's the way these halakhic arguments go. Like, well, do you know that they're allergic? Because if you know they're allergic and you give them the gluten hamantaschen, then no, you haven't completed the mitzvah. But then it was back and forth. And at the end, it was like, what if they don't even know? And the person I was conversing with said, even if they didn't know that they were allergic, if it turns out they were allergic, you did not complete the mitzvah. And I got really upset about this at the time. This was 10 years ago or so. Because in my mind, my intentions, I gave the mishloach manot in good faith, and why should I be held accountable for something that they didn't even know?
Decker.
And it was very upsetting to me 10 years ago having this conversation where my recollection is that the halacha follows my friend who argued that it has to be fully edible for the person, whether or not they know that they in advance that they are allergic to the thing in order to have fulfilled the mitzvah. And now looking back on that conversation, thinking about thinking about the difference between intention and impact. Intention matters, but so does impact. Even if you had no way of knowing that would be the impact in advance, impact matters. And that feels like a really important lesson for us, for Jews Talk Racial Justice, and thinking about how we move through the world. So that was a thing that we didn't talk about last year that came out of Purim study for me, and has definitely, I was uncomfortable with this 10 years ago. And it's taken, the continued work and thought and actually the racial justice work and recognizing that impact matters deeply, even when it is not intended, to help me kind of get to a place where right, that's the lesson.
And it's interesting, I think too, because, or a facet that I'm thinking about with it as someone who has typically oodles of compassion, where there's a way in which from a joyous justice perspective, I think the comment wouldn't be quite what your friend's was. It would be like, yes, that work you did was sacred. And regardless of whether it's sacred or not, it's still not helpful to that person. And so how do we continue to iterate and help things land and connect? And how can we continue to reach for connection? You know what I mean? Like not all is lost. And even like, so like about but your desire wasn't able to fully go through, and how do we get curious about that? And all the different things that we do. But there's also a way in which I appreciate the directness of what you're saying, because for me, it ties into themes around that I've been thinking about lately, around reinterrogating some of my compassion, that I want to very much keep it, but I'm starting to notice certain spaces where it's like with a fine-tooth comb, where I'm like, ooh, but there's compassion here, but I'm also allowing, this is creating some space at times for me to allow mistreatment still. So how do I finally parse this out? And I'm not someone, although that's a very natural human thing, and I've felt that at times, but through my healing and emotional processing, I'm not someone who's saying, oh, we need to totally do away with compassion. No, but I want to refine where I am applying it. And so in this moment, even though I just said everything I just said, I still appreciate the rigor involved in what you shared, because there's a way where I want 10 years ago you to feel held and supported, but often that held and supported happens at the expense of the person who now has hives, not
right.
getting what they need. And that doesn't have to be that way, but that's often how it plays out. And so I appreciate that sort of Musar-esque counterbalancing nature of what you're saying, of this is the principle. And I struggled with it before, and here it is now. And here it is again, where I'm now re-encountering it, and I'm able to appreciate the Torah and the importance of that.
I think it's important to note too that when thinking about the compassion for the hamantaschen maker, that this is not, and part of what was so upsetting to me 10 years ago is like I was placing a lot of focus on this single mitzvah, but it's not the only one. It's not even the only one that I have the opportunity with this specific mitzvah, right? Like Purim comes around each year. And so there will be opportunity again to try again.
To bake more cookies.
And to bake more cookies. To bake gluten-free cookies for that specific friend, or whatever it might be.
Whatever,
like,
yeah.
The possibility of iteration actually is important to hold at the same moment of saying that this mitzvah was not, this specific attempt to fulfill the mitzvah was not complete, because there will be another chance. It's not like, oh, you're done, game over. It's, there will be additional rounds. And so I think that's been a really important piece of my coming to comfort with acknowledging that, that impact must be accounted for in addition to intention.
Right. And so side note, I'm thoroughly enjoying that you somehow managed to integrate hamantaschen into a DEI conversation.
Intention and impact.
Yeah, I'm thoroughly enjoying that. So I just want to lift that up and enjoy that and savor that. I would also add that I really loved your Facebook post about it. It was very ASMR-esque. Like, look at the bubbling hamantaschen fresh out of the oven. I don't remember what it stands for. I feel like people who know. It's the videos that are online that people watch. People like doing these sensory things, or watching someone churn something, or my ex used to watch a lot of them. Like, what is that crackling noise? It's a video. It's helping me sleep.
Yeah, I took them out of the oven, and like I could see like the jam still bubbling, and I was like, "That's fascinating." So I just took
I watched a few rounds of it last night. It was like, this is mesmerizing.
Yeah, the jam is actually all my husband actually makes jam, so all of the jam that I used in our
so good. Oh, I love
homemade jam. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, my grandma made a ton of jam. So, okay, so there's like a few different thoughts I'm thinking. One, of late, I continue to, in my adult life, relate to Esther increasingly, like I did when I was working at the URJ and I had this prominent position as a person of color. And now it's getting more nuanced and even a deeper connection around there are parts of my identity and my life through subtly or explicitly being told by loved ones around me that in order for you to stay safe, it's best for you not to talk about this in certain ways. And, but now I'm a fully grown adult who's interested in releasing my internalized oppression. And it turns out that some of that internalized oppression is family contracts, quote unquote, around some of the best ways that my family to date or in recent generations has found it best to survive. And I really love the Assata Shakur quote that we must love and protect each other and we have nothing to lose but our chains. And I feel like I need to write that somewhere because I really think fundamentally that actually is true, but we're conditioned through pleasure and comfort and different things and false senses of freedom and liberation to believe that isn't the case. But I do actually believe at the end of the day that is profoundly true. And so I just want to note that I really appreciate this story. And I also, as I was thinking about this and as you were talking and we were in conversation, I started and I was thinking about all of what you were sharing and also thinking about how I relate to it and also in the context of different coaching and mentorship relationships I have with various Jewish leaders of color, officially and unofficially, that there are some common threads I'm seeing show up that that also affect me that I want to name here that I think is really interesting. And this is some fresh thinking that I'm very excited to share and dive more deeply into even after this wonderful holiday has passed around the relationship between Vashti and Esther. In that I initially a few years ago noticed because it was interesting to me when I realized that I connected with Esther because throughout my childhood, other than when I was a little girl, and then I really liked princesses with long hair and I would like take stick toilet paper on the end of a stick and pretend it was like a wand. I would spin it around and I was really into that. But after that, like once I started to get into like fourth grade through preteen years in high school, I was much more, to quote Tori Amos, like a raisin girl rather than a cornflake girl. I was much more like, a budding feminist. And so like wanting to own different things. So throughout, other than like my toddlerhood, I also really liked Ariel. So like as a little kid, I was really into that sort of thing. But for most of my childhood and young adult life, the princesses aren't people who I would connect to for inspiration. So it was interesting to me, though, to see that because that's in some ways how I was positioned, given my relative youth, for the position that I was taking on. And it made sense to me in a number of ways because of the years of work that I'd done, often working 2 jobs to get to that point. But still, I was sort of this young, fresh person and very much as Purim rolled around repeatedly over that time that I noticed like, oh yeah, and there are different things that I have been told where I started to notice these shared experiences. And then I think over time at different points in my career, I have very much felt connected to Vashti, where things were asked of me, not so, thank God, not around my body, but around asking me to make compromises that I, in exchange for money or continued prominence or a platform that I was being given. And for me in those roles, both with my own analysis and with the support networks I had in place, I was very clear in those moments in a way that I can project and guess, perhaps this is what Vashti was thinking of. I love all these different trappings, but that isn't actually why I'm here. I have a clear sense of self-worth and purpose, and I have a deep sense of commitment to my people's liberation. And if you think I'm going to put a jewel or I'm going to accept a paycheck in exchange for me selling out my people, that's not going to happen. And what I want to say here is that I see similar-ish dynamics playing out here. And to cut to the chase, I think for Jews of color and for anyone who is a part of a targeted group within another targeted group or just in general, that one of the most liberatory things we can do, besides honoring each of us, is for Esther and Vashti to cut through the noise, and not publicly, and not even necessarily ask for permission, but find ways to connect and talk and to support one another, because they are both navigating not identical, but very, in some cases, identical around sexism and misogyny and patriarchy. They're navigating very similar things. And because of life experience, because of appearance, because of different things, other variables that may be happening, they may be making different choices, but ultimately they have a lot to align around and could greatly benefit from each other's insight and perspective and resource and help each other. Now, to add this to the broader world, we're also working within the context of Jews of color, especially for Black Jews, but also for Jews of color in general, that we are literally incredibly under-resourced. So one thing that I want to say to my fellow Jews of color is that I can tell you, for me personally, and also for a number of us are working very diligently to get free and to create a platform and space for all of us. But because of that chronic under-resourcing, it's hard for us to always be able to reach for each other, but a number of us are here. And as someone who is a Vashti, who is both, who has embodied both Esther and Vashti, I want to say to you, if I am a Vashti in your life, within reason, I have a pretty busy schedule, but you can reach for me, especially if I see that you are in an Esther role, or you recently left an Esther role and now you are in a time of Vashti-dom. And there are ways for women, especially women of color, Jewish women of color, people with targeted and marginalized identities, where we are given access. And one of the ways that I think of this, that I've wanted to write an op-ed about this for a while, that before it felt too spicy, and because I'm continuing to shed different forms of internalized oppression, it's starting to feel a little less spicy for me to share publicly and just share, but I see a dynamic playing out that I would call neo-plantationism. So this is specifically referencing a Black enslavement dynamic, but I'm noticing there's a pattern at times. And you could say that a version of this was playing out with Vashti and Esther, where it's like, oh, we're giving you access, but it's entirely on our terms, and don't get too big for your britches. Oh, you actually want to have boundaries around your body? You're out. Oh, you want to have boundaries about the integrity that you bring to your job and certain things that you are not willing to forsake? That's not going to fly. And we're conditioned, and so many of us in different ways are conditioned to think that it's just us, but it isn't. It's actually a pattern. I informally came up with this title, and I figured somebody had already thought of this, and I looked it up and they haven't. But I refer to it as neo-plantationism, where there's an expectation of, we're making so much progress and we let you into the big house. But now you're starting to have opinions. Man, just because we congratulated you and said you were intelligent doesn't mean we actually fully, this is the subtext, people don't say this, but that we actually fully respect you, and we will, just as you are replaceable. You are replaceable. And what I want to say is that is the oppression speaking, that is the internalization that folks in oppressor and conformity roles have taken on, but that isn't actually the truth of our existence. We each are incredibly divine, sacred beings, as all humans are, and explicitly, actually, in certain ways, because of our targeting and oppression and our survival through that makes us more divine. It makes us worthy of profound love. And so I want to invite folks, as you're navigating things, to notice at times, are you in more of a Vashti role or an Esther role? And what is a different sort of role that you want, whether that's a leader in our world today or a name, Sasha Fierce, whatever your alter ego is that you want to give a name to, right? For me, I often like to channel my Hebrew name Rakefet, which is a cyclamen, or another loose translation is a flower that grows in a rocky place, right? Like that name encapsulates a lot for me of there may be stone and pain around me and I am going to thrive. I'm going to find that little sliver of sun, and then I'm going to work on expanding that sliver into a valley so that more of us can thrive, right? And I think we get to push back and also at times notice when those dynamics are happening. And one of the core ways we can push back is by, and if we're in either role, as we have resource, which is tricky. So also don't be hard on yourself, because I have this too as much as I can. I reach and respond to folks, and I also need to, with the under-resourcing and chronic oppressive dynamics I'm navigating, also make a way. And that's its own body of work, but that we can continue to contradict this by reaching out. And so I would explicitly encourage my Jewish leaders of color. And for those of you who are listening who are Jewish leaders of color, who also see how you have another targeted identity where this dynamic is playing out, this goes for you too, because it's a tried and true oppression playbook move, right? Is with a number of folks. And I have to remind myself of this. And I've gotten lots of help and support and thinking around this and training, because I've taken the time to reach for those things, is even a single conversation. Because I find when I've been in that Esther role at times, it's scary. And we've been given messages either directly, explicitly, or subtly about your predecessor and the problem. And oh, what a problem Vashti was. And oh, she was always so difficult. Really? Because I thought she was living in this castle for several years. And y'all used to sing her praises. Right? And you don't need to say that to them or to the king or whoever's in the king role, but we can reach for email and phone and interconnectedness we have with each other and start to connect offline. And even a singular conversation can open up different possibilities and perspectives when we start to reach for each other and no longer let those who we often love, but also are some of the most significant purveyors of our oppression in our community, dictate the terms of the kinds of relationships we can have with those with whom we share identity. And that's one of a number of different ways we can start to get free.
I think that's exactly, the story is really illustrative of that, right? The structure of the way the story has presented it, the only relationship that Esther has with Vashti or any of the other maidens who were in the running to be Vashti's successor was that of competitor, right? Like the people in power set it up so that all the women would be competitors with one another. But what you're saying, April, is that we don't have to accept that relationship as given. We can break that mold. We can say like, no, that's not my competitor. Like, I know where the real structures are and where the real power is. And I reject that idea that this person is my competitor, and rather, they are my sibling or whatever.
Yeah, they're my sibling. They're my
the more liberatory
friend.
Relationship.
They are the person who likely, if I look around and I see a number of things where there's lots of progress that needs to be made, but I also feel pretty comfortable, I can acknowledge likely that predecessor had something to do with making the space so that I feel comfortable right now, and that there is an interconnectedness, and we each get to decide depending upon, because I think that's also part of the resistance, is it's not saying inherently, which is another way oppression can work, of like, oh, you're all the same and you're all meant to be best friends. That's not what I'm saying. Right. What I'm saying is that, as you said, there's a siblinghood and there's an interconnectedness around different elements of things that we share and likely similar experiences that we've had, and us bringing our minds together can only help to serve our liberation, and also doing so on our terms. We can tell the people in the castle that we're doing that. We also don't have to. A key part of movement building work is determining what's known externally and also what we need and the things that we can do to take care of ourselves. Because you best believe the people in the castle and other successful liberation movements have absolutely taken on ownership of that part of their liberation to begin to start to set the terms of who they get to be relationship with whom they get to be in relationship, and also who needs to know and who doesn't need to know. And not from a place of dishonesty, but in a place of beginning to, or sensing without even fully knowing, intuiting that the climate we're navigating is, quote unquote, continually getting better. But if you don't feel safe around sharing certain things with folks, unless it relates to your job and you need to be transparent and honest about that, but if it's about you getting the resource you need, that's for you to decide. And you can still be fully loyal to the context in which you're operating, and also be loyal to yourself and to a body of work that helped each of us get to where we are, and that we want to continue to feed that body of work of liberation and liberatory work in service of our specific liberation and also broader collective liberation. So I am here for Vashti and Esther breaking tradition and meeting behind the castle, taking out their cell phones, which they didn't have at that time, and saying, hey, I'm sure we're each navigating different things, but when it makes sense, let's talk. Because I've been through something, and I know you've been through something. And I think we can support each other, and we can just have a conversation, and that can be sacred. And from there, we can figure out where to go. But our liberation is bound up together. So let's reach through all of the oppressive reasons not to. Let's reach for each other. Whew.
Happy Purim, y'all.
Happy Hamantaschen eating. Yay. Haman. Boo. It sounded more like gargling, but you know.
It's an organic Gregor. I also want to name that we are having a live event next week, and you can come.
Yes, we are. We are. If you're not already on our email list, you should go to joyousjustice.com, and you'll have a little pop-up window where you can sign up for our list, because we're going to be sending up specific updates about that very exciting event. And or also, you can join us on Facebook at Joyously Pursuing Racial Justice, a private Facebook group where you can join, and you can also get more information about the event there. And yeah, yay, it's going to be fun. Thanks for tuning in. Our show's theme music was composed by Elliot Hammer. You can find this track and other beats on Instagram at Elliot Hammer. If this episode resonated with you, please share it and subscribe. To join the conversation, visit JewsTalkRacialJustice.com, where you can send us a question or suggestion, access our show notes, and learn more about our team. Take care until next time, and stay humble and keep going.